Hello and welcome, I'm Kara Scribner, and I'm going to do a very quick December wrap-up of the books that I read for the end of the year, and I just want to chat about them a little bit. I will be honest, this was not a particularly great month of reading. I thought a lot of it was finishing books that I read that I'd started and not finished during the year, and some books that I'd been really excited about that I didn't love. There was a few nonfiction I loved, but outside of that, I didn't have a huge reading month, so let's talk about it. First of all, we have The Kingdom Back by Marillo. Marillo has been a favorite author for a little while. I really love some of her books, and I was really excited. I waited for this book for 4 years, and then I started it last year, and then I didn't finish it until December. I ended up really gravitating between a 3 and 4 star because I really love the ending, but I really didn't like the fantasy aspect. The story behind it is Mozart had an older sister who kind of taught him how to play piano and played with him, but was eventually kind of phased out as he became more famous and she became an adult. The quote that I really love it and cemented it as a book that I like is, "I had been 8 years old then. I had turned 18 in January. My years of performing for an audience were over." I have a Friday Reads where I just kind of like sob and talk about it, and it has my reaction to it, and I really did enjoy those aspects. I really didn't like the fantasy aspect. We have the fantasy as kind of a utilization for kind of her conversations around it, and for me, even though I really love fantasy, this part just didn't work for me. But I really love the story, and I really love the relationship between the family. Coming off Kingdom Back, I wanted to finish another book that I have been waiting for a very long time. This is Tales from the Hinterland. I really love the Hazelwood. This is a book that, even though I don't talk about it a lot and isn't very popular, is definitely one of my favorite fantasy books. I really love it, and I love the exploration of dark fairy tales, this kind of mystique of this grandmother that no one knows of who is a recluse and has these books that are now out of print that have like this mysterious stuff, and this is the collection of short stories that she drew from and that she wrote, and I really enjoyed it. I feel like I would have enjoyed it much more in 2018 when I read the Hazelwood, or in 2020 when I reread it. The next book is an interesting departure from my normal books. It is I Thought You Hated Me by Marie Naomi. I really enjoyed parts of this. I really enjoyed reading her story. She specifically talks about like the call out of sexual harassment in the comics characters, and I really enjoyed reading her story of the way that she used comics and the way that she used writing to talk about that. And I would give her essay on sexual harassment in comics like a 5 out of 5 stars, but this book did not quite reach it for me. I think I gave it a 2 to 3. I really enjoyed elements of watching her grow up with a friend who they had this interesting relationship where they thought they didn't like each other, they were competing, and as they grew up they came back into each other's lives and realized that they actually really liked each other. And I thought the moral of it, of looking at how women are pitted against each other, is very interesting. It did fall apart a little bit when in older lives we kind of like get introduced very shortly that her friend has MS, and then it's kind of like not really addressed. And I just wish everything was a little bit deeper and a little bit more discussed rather than just skimmed over. But I also realize that it's her medium of writing, and I don't really want to critique that because it's intentionally what she's doing. It's just not, I really like things that are like 100 feet deep. The next book I finished was a poetry anthology. This is the Griffith Prize of 2021, and I really enjoyed reading this, especially the beginning. The first collection is selections from Obit by Victoria Chang, and I really loved it. It made me really emotional. And the next few I also really enjoyed, but as we went on, I did not enjoy them as much. I enjoyed seeing the diverse range and stories told, but a lot of their meters and just the way that they write poetry isn't as much my poetry, so I thought it was interesting, and I will definitely read. I have some of the older collections on here, and I will probably read it because I like Canadian poetry, but this one was definitely more of the middle of the road. Submerge by K.Y. Robinson, and I have a weird relationship with it. So I was having a very bad mental health day, and of course I went to Chapters because that's where you go, and I started reading this book and I really liked it, and I ended up buying it and bringing it home. I definitely liked a lot of aspects of it. I liked how she talked about Black womanhood. I love how she talked about different areas of different things. I wrote poems and I wrote reactions to it and stuff in this book. I ended up sitting probably more in the 3 range of the poems. As it went on, I liked it a little bit less. She kind of diverges into more like longer form poems. Poems like this are a little bit less my thing. I like shorter, more concise, very beautiful in every line, and I thought even like a quarter of the way through I was like very impressed at the fact that she kept the mode. Yeah, it's just, it's not I don't think it's a poetry collection that is going to become in my hearts of hearts, but I think I have an emotional connection because in that moment I really needed some poems. Also, the art in it. The first poem is just a poem that I needed to hear in that moment, and it was "The bondage and jubilee, hymns and broken hallelujahs created the sea in me." And I felt like I was just in the midst of a crisis, and I was like, this is a good poem. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know if a book that kind of really saved me that moment could have lived up as a collection, but that's my story. The next one was a huge disappointment, and this is The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Shuri. I was excited for this. It's a story based on Indian mythology, and it's about these two women whose lives collect as a servant and as a princess, and I'll be honest, I felt no emotional connection to these characters whatsoever. I just was like, not bored, but just disinterested. I found more interest in the side characters, but I felt like I never felt completely situated in the world. I never felt the stakes were particularly high, and things would happen and I'm like, but I didn't follow where the emotional connection came in. And I've seen very like high and very low ratings of this book, and I think that other people might enjoy it. It was not the book for me. Another book I finished this month was No One Is Talking About This by Patricia Lockwood. It has been a controversial book of the year. I don't have a lot of thoughts that I haven't already given. I have gone on several rants. I enjoyed it more, I think, reading it physically, reading the first 25%, and then I picked it up on audio because it'd been a few months. And I thought particularly the conversation about V-Day and stuff like that really hit me. But the one I read it on audiobook, the way that the audiobook kind of chose to emphasize things, I thought that it was not an emphasis on the moments that I found very profound. It's so different from the way that I view the world that I just can't relate. On the other hand, a book that I shouldn't have profound reactions to, but I did, was Things My Son Used to Know About the World by Frederick Bachmann. I really, really enjoyed this collection of nonfiction about stories about his family, about his life, and about the kind of man that he wants his son to be. I really enjoyed it. Some were a little bit more hits, and some had some strong, like, 2012 vibe humor that I was like, not really my thing, but just the admirance for his wife and the desire to see his son grow up to be a man who not only is a man in the traditional sense, but like a man who seeks out to give women space and have conversations and to be considerate and compassionate. He really wants his son to grow up and love football because he loves football, and that's how he connects to his dad. And he's like, I don't know how to connect with you, but you know, you always dance a lot more than you enjoy watching football. And he's like, you know, and it's rooted in his own insecurity when also allowing the space for his son to grow up however he wants. And I really, really enjoyed that. I feel like throughout this, I have no idea how to talk about these books, and this is Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. And this one was a hit and also a miss and also a yes at the same time, and I just don't really know. I enjoyed certain aspects of it. I related on parts to each and every one of the characters, and yet I didn't feel the emotional connection I had in the previous ones, and I was definitely disturbed by some of the age difference things. And those are my thoughts. I feel like I can't give this one full justice, but this is Tristan Strond Punches a Hole in the Sky, and this is a middle grade fantasy novel that I finished. I originally started it during middle grade magic and was quite enjoying it and got distracted and never finished it. But this is a book that I definitely enjoyed elements of it. I don't think I was in the mood to read it, but I wanted to finish before the end of the year. So yeah, I would recommend it. I think that it has really strong African mythology stories set in the US. I really enjoyed the villain. He actually gave me chills. And I look forward to rereading this and continuing on the series in a mood when I'm a little bit more into fantasy, but I am glad I finished it. And then the last 3 books of the year were actually quite hits. And this is The Ghost in the House by Sarah Leary. She's a Canadian author, and this is set in Vancouver, and I thought it was really, really interesting. It's about this woman who died about 5 years ago, and she's just now appeared, and her husband is married and has a stepdaughter, and it's her interactions with these people, and I thought it was really, really interesting and talks about what it means. I really enjoy the conversation about letting go and falling in love and all of these different ways. I definitely look forward to rereading the future. It's interesting conversation around her and the stepdaughter and their relationship. I wasn't always completely pleased with how that went, but I really think I need to think a little bit more on it. Now we have the Mammoth of the month, and this is Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. After I was done school, I was like, you know what, I need to jump into a massive historical fiction book. I really actually enjoyed this a lot. I really enjoyed the setting and the stories and how much Hilary Mantel had really taken in and looked at the characters and plotted them out. I thought it was really interesting at the way she's able to depict them in such short sentences, like, you know, Henry was a man with a surprisingly high voice for what a commanding man he was, or talking about the fact that Anne was not particularly like beautiful, but she was a person who had this striking image, or the way that she's like touching him to kind of get his attention as he's starting to falter a little bit. And I really enjoyed those. It felt very human, and I really look forward to reading Bring Up the Bodies, which is such a great name in the future. I definitely did not get 100% of the book because It is so big. This was not meant to be my last book of the year, but it ended up being, and it is A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. I really, really enjoyed the conversation around this. I thought the quotes were excellent. Me being like, I need to pull it up. I pretty much read an essay to my roommate where it was mostly just quotes, because I was like, I have thoughts on it, but like none of the quotes are particularly as great. I think that there is a good conversation to have about the fact that her pretty much thesis is that a woman needs money and a place of her own to work. And Alice Walker actually wrote an essay and stuff like that that I found in another collection that looks at the fact that, you know, that does exclude a lot of the women who did write, who did like work, and she specifically talks about Phyllis Wheatley, who was a woman who was enslaved and still wrote, and she didn't even own her own body. So I thought there was definitely some limitations. This is a quote speaking about the degradation of women for the sake of ego. Woolf says, possibly when Professor insisted a little too emphatically upon the inferiority of women, he was concerned not with their inferiority, but his own superiority. That was, that he was protecting rather hot-headedly and with too much emphasis, because it was the jewel to him of the rarest price. And again, the history of men's opposition to women's emancipation is more interesting, perhaps, than the story of emancipation itself. And then I will leave one last quote, and it says, if women had no existence save the fiction written by men, one would imagine for a person of the utmost importance. But this is a woman in fiction. In fact, as Professor Trevelyan points out in History of England, she was locked up, beaten, and flung about the room. That part particularly like borrowed into my mind about the idea of the way that women are represented versus the way that women are not represented, and the reality of women behind the goddess and the muse and all of these other things. So I will leave you with that. Thank you so much for 2021, and I will see you next time.